This is Terror House Radio with Matt Forney and Bryden Proctor.
Yeah, welcome to a Terror House Radio, episode number 48. I'm Matt Forney, your charming and loquacious host, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Terror House Press. My co-host and producer, Bryden Proctor, will not be joining us this episode. He is off doing something. He's doing something, but he's not here. But I will be having on the program Bill Marchant. He is a Canadian author and Twitter personality. He's the author of the book Northern Reaction, and most importantly, he is the creator, editor of Terror House's next book, Ending Bigly, The Many Fates of Donald Trump, which will be out this Friday, January 8th. Ending Bigly is a fictional exploration themed around the idea of how Donald Trump, the 45th president, will end. It features short story contributions from a number of different writers, including but not limited to Bronze Age Pervert, Faisal Marzipan, aka the Labanitarian, Nick B. Steves, Mencius Moldbug Man, Patrick Kilgore, Geo Penn, and many, many more. It has over 24 contributors, in fact. Bill and I will be talking about the book and other things, so stay tuned. It's coming right up. Bill, welcome to Terror House Radio. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, I imagine a lot of people listening know who you are. You've contributed to Terror House, you've done your own work, you've published your own books, etc. But for the people in the audience who don't know who you are, can you just give the Cliff's Notes version of yourself, your work, that kind of thing?
Well, I'm a Canadian author. I live on, it's not Hudson's Bay proper, it's a little bit south of there. It's called James Bay. And my wife Rose and I, we live in a houseboat on James Bay, and I retired a number of years ago, and since then I've been writing for the internet in a variety of capacities. As you said, I've written for Terror House, and I've written for a number of sites that no longer exist. And then I've written on my own site, and as you said, I do have a book out, and the reason why we're here is there's another one forthcoming.
Yeah, the James Bay sounds like a lovely place, and I would like to encourage everyone to go buy Bill's other book and stuff. There will be links in the description and such. But let's talk about Ending Bigly, The Many Fates of Donald Trump. This book, you came to me, last month with this idea, and you want to kind of explain, the book, how it came into being, that sort of thing.
Well, sure. So I've had this thought for a while. Someone once said that America doesn't have a Virgil, and that idea really struck with me. I think it was might have even been Faisal Marzipan, who has also published through Terror House his book The White Swan, which you should also pick up. It's quite good.
Yes, please buy it.
But Faisal, at one point, I believe it was Faisal, said that America doesn't have a Virgil. And that, to me, really struck a chord, because with the Aeneid, Rome was connected to the mythos of greater history. That they became a part of the myth with Greece and the Iliad. And then the later authors in Britain was an empire. They did something similar by saying that Brutus was the origin of Britain, and sort of built on that and connected themselves there. But there's never been someone that sort of did the same thing at the same scale for America, and I wanted to figure out why that happened, and that kind of planted a seed in my brain that I should do something like that. And then I realized that I don't have nearly the skill for that. I also don't have the time for that. That would require months and months of research and planning and historical narratives and finding the right threads. But what I could do, and I've always enjoyed Borges, I think is how you pronounce his name, but the author of Labyrinths and all of that, I've always enjoyed his work. And if he came up with a similar idea, he wouldn't bother writing the whole, basically the Aeneid for America. What he would do is write about someone trying to do that. And so I got it in my head that I should write about someone trying to write the story of America and connect it to the larger mythos and what's going to happen. And then this past little while, I realized that the reason why no one had done that yet, why there wasn't an American Virgil, is because Virgil wrote after Caesar. And it wasn't until Rome was properly an empire that there was the opportunity to turn it into a cohesive whole. It was one thing going towards one goal, so it had to have one past. And I know that there's complications with that, obviously, with the Romulus and Remus versus Aeneas and all of that. But it was still one goal going from one past to one future, and America would need to wait until that happened. And then I thought, well, what if Trump is that Caesar? What if there's going to be an American Virgil? And then, I thought, well, that's the perfect opportunity to write this story. But I realized partway through it that I didn't have enough. I wasn't there yet. And I don't think that America was there yet. That we're not past that point. We aren't at the empire yet, so there isn't one story that can be told. And that made me think, well, why not tell multiple stories? Why not give the opportunity to have many stories told at once? And that's kind of where Ending Bigly came from, is the idea that there's someone chronicling attempts at becoming the American Virgil, attempts at figuring out what's going to happen in the future with Trump, with America, all of that kind of thing. And so I approached Terror House with the idea, and I am deeply, deeply impressed because I wanted to have it out before January 20th, because right now we're in this liminal space where anything in the world could happen. You don't know what's going to happen with Trump. You don't know what's going to happen with the Senate. We simply don't know. And on January 20th, that's going to change, and there's going to be only one path forward. Maybe a couple of options that could be unusual, but for the most part, we'll know what's happening on January 20th. So I wanted to have the book out before then, but I didn't approach Terror House with this idea until around, December 9th?
Yeah, it was at the beginning of December.
Yeah, so I am deeply, deeply impressed with the people at Terror House. That the projected release date, if I have this correctly, is January 8th.
Oh,
and the fact that,
yes.
Is that in fact, do I have
yes,
that correct?
in fact, I actually announced it as January 8th at the... I recorded this first segment before you came on, so I already announced it as January 8th. We're going to be talking about it in the newsletter on Monday, which, I mean, I'm not even sure why I'm mentioning that, because this podcast will go out after the newsletter. And I'm hoping to do an unveil on Sunday. So by the time this podcast goes up, everyone will have seen the materials. The first excerpts from it will be posted on the site. It's coming together nicely, and we have to thank all the authors who got their stories in too, because it's a monster of a book. It's about 60,000 words, about 27 different contributors, 28 I think, and they all wrote really good stuff and got it together in the span of about 2-3 weeks.
I was incredibly impressed with the quality of the work that we received. I was not expecting that many, and I wasn't expecting them to be of that quality. Some of them I have reached out to a number of them to encourage them to write more, because it's just stunning. It really is.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the impetus for this book being thinking about the idea of who the American Virgil is, because it reminded me of something about 3 years ago when I got Terror House started. I had a co-editor named Glon. A lot of you will probably remember him. He used to be a pretty big presence in our circles. He's retired now. But he had a podcast, a brief-lived podcast called Heokapod, where one of the contributors talked about the idea that there's really there's no iconic kind of American work or American literary style compared to other countries. With, say, English literature, obviously there are different epochs where things change, but English literature has a certain character, going from Shakespeare up to, the modern day, Lord Byron, all that stuff. French literature, it's got a certain character, going from, going from Flaubert to Balzac to Celine, Russian literature definitely got its own character. Dostoevsky, Pushkin, up to Solzhenitsyn. But in America, our literary greats are as varied as Mark Twain. Why am I having Ernest Hemingway?
Melville.
Yeah, Melville. Melville's a good one. Yeah, Melville, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Charles Bukowski. All that under one roof. And you talking about the lack of an American Virgil. Well, I mean, that does make sense. America is not truly, it has its own distinct culture, obviously, but it's not truly formed in the way that a Britain or a France or a Russia has. And we may be watching that right now as, we're in this liminal space as you described it.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. One of the interesting ways that you set this book up, is that you actually have it in a frame story. It's not just a bunch of essays. You tied it all together with the idea of this character, in which you talk about this character questing to become the American Vigil or find the American Vigil. Virgil. Why do I keep saying Vigil?
Sorry, yes. So the frame narrative, again, I'm taking that idea from, as I said, what I thought Borges would have done. And the frame narrative came before I even had the idea for the book. What I had originally hoped to do was put in a number of examples of the ideas that he came up with. This character questing to be the American Virgil, and I simply did not have enough creativity. I couldn't think outside of my own box enough to make it a worth reading story. Which was why I thought, well, there's plenty of creative people out there, and wouldn't this be a more full picture if we heard from multiple voices? So that's what we did.
Yes, it's it's definitely an interesting approach, and the material in Ending Bigly kind of stretches across many different genres. The emphasis is on short stories, obviously, but there's also a couple of poems in there. There's some nonfiction essays, and we have contributions from such names as Bronze Age Pervert, Borzoi. Mencius Molbug Man, Nick B. Steves came out of retirement to write something for the book.
I'm very thankful of him doing that. Yeah, it was very kind of him.
Yeah, I like everything in the book, but I'm not gonna get too deep in the details here. Read the book, kids. Read the books, kids, if you want to find out what happens in it. But one of my favorite stories is actually one by Patrick Kilgore, Old Man Trump and the Tochka. Just because it's very melancholy. But you also highlighted a few others. A story by Peter Paradise that is really good. Bap's contribution is short and sweet. And the Old Pug Man had me rolling.
Yes, that one was quite wonderful. It took a little bit of extra effort to get it in there, but I think it was worth it.
Yeah, it's got a lot of images. I think you guys will enjoy this one. When you were soliciting entries for the book, did you have a specific style in mind? You have a wide variety of writers in the book, each with their own takes, and there's no uniform take here too. We've got people who are very pro Trump. We've got people who are more skeptical of Trump, to kind of put it nicely. We've got people who just go all the way out into left field with some really, really interesting takes. Did you have a vision for the book beyond just the question, how will Trump end?
I don't much think so. I think that I had what I would have written in my head, and that was sort of the problem. Was I had maybe 3 or 4 stories that I felt were the biggest possibilities, and I believe that of those 4 stories, 3 of them someone wrote their own interpretation of that. And then the fourth one was the one that I included myself at the end. So I was happy that my ideas for what would happen were represented in the book. But beyond that, no, I had hoped for things that surprised me. That was what I wanted from this, was for the stories to be as surprising to the audience as they were to me. So, for example, the one that the Patrick Kilgore example was, I would have never thought of that. That's well beyond my level of creativity for how Trump could have ended. Another one that was quite impressive was the Peter Paradise one. I never would have taken that idea in that direction. The general concept of that, I don't think that we're giving too many spoilers, is that Trump goes to jail. And that he wasn't the only one that mentioned that particular possibility, but he took it in a direction that I never would have thought of. And I really, really appreciated that. And that was why I had sort of the open call to anyone that was interested could put their idea out there. And a number of the most interesting and creative stories were from people that you wouldn't have expected, that were simply surprises. And that was exactly what I hoped for, and I think that's how it turned out.
Yeah, I was just vaping there and completely fucked my voice, but yeah, when the yeah, it's interesting that you got all these different writers and such. Now, we're obviously not going to talk about details about stories that you rejected or whatever, but with regards to the specific ordering of the works in Ending Bigly, you generally kind of, it's not really like I said, there's a frame story. It's not organized some there's a poetry section, here's the fiction section, here's the essay section. They all kind of are interspersed in a way that seems a bit random, but as I was reading it, it suddenly clicked and it made a bit of sense. Was there a specific idea you had in mind when you were organizing the book the way that you did? The way that you organized it actually kind of reminds me of The Pussy by Delicious Tacos, a book that seems almost just kind of random when you start reading it. It's just like, he took all these stories and he just put them together without really thinking about it. But then as you read and get into it, you get like the overarching theme of, I guess, hopelessness of that book. Like it just clicks like when you're about 2/3 of the way through, as you notice like all the themes kind of tying together. Did you have anything like that in mind when you were organizing the book and laying it out the way that it is?
Well, I did, and my primary goal when I started organizing the book was, because of the tight time frame, I originally just wanted to put the stories in the order that they were submitted. So Mr. Landshark has the first slot in the stories after the prologue, and that was simply because he was the first one that submitted. He submitted it, I believe it was 3 hours after he was asked. It was quite impressive. When you read the story, you will be impressed that he was able to come up with that as quickly as he did. So, but beyond that one, once I got started with putting them simply in the order that they came in, I realized that would not be sufficient for the level of depth and quality that were contained in these stories. So with that in mind, I started to work out a tension between the stories. What I wanted was for you to get to the end of a story and have Trump triumphant riding on a lion into battle and winning the day, and then immediately go to Trump dying in jail. And I didn't want the reader to become comfortable, was my goal throughout the narrative, was when it seemed to be too good, I wanted it to go bad, and when it seemed to be too bad, I wanted it to go back to being good. I wanted this to be unexpected. I wanted it to be building towards something that you didn't know what. And then I love the I don't want to give too much away for it, but the way that it ends, I wanted it to be very ambiguous. I wanted it to be this thing that no one knows where it's going, because that's the whole purpose of the book, is that we don't know where we're going with this. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think that it lands, the last couple of stories really hammer home that note of we do not know what the future will bring. And so that was my general organizing principle, was this tension back and forth between positive and negative feelings, and then ending with you're not really sure whether it is positive or negative.
Yeah, it's organized in a way that the reader, it doesn't become predictable at any point. Like you said, you'll read something that's really, negative and kind of, a downer, and then you'll read something that's a bit more positive. It keeps you on that kind of that seesaw of emotions all the way throughout. And I like the way it comes together like that. You talking about the ambiguity on it is a key detail, because I don't want this book to be written off as Terror House is apolitical. But my political leanings are well known, and as are the political leanings of a lot of the writers contributing to this volume. It's not some triumphalist fan fiction type thing, like, oh, Trump is going to defeat all the bad guys and save the day. He's going to cross the Rubicon. No, that could happen. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it could also end very horribly. The book approaches pretty much every angle you could think of on the subject. It goes into depth on those different angles. Terror House has one of the things I have kind of joking around is that we're the world's number one producer of memelet. We have a number of writers who will write kind of satirical short stories about, internet personalities and public figures and whatnot. I guess you consider this in a way kind of part of that genre, and that's, it's all fictional stories about most of it is fictional stories about the most famous public figure of our time. But it's not intended to be triumphalist or masturbatory. It's intended to be funny and entertaining, and maybe you'll learn something from it.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that even the triumphalist ones, for example, there's sometimes even the ones that seem to be triumphalist, you'll start to understand that it's darker than that. And some of the ones where it seems to be black pilling, for lack of a better term, even those ones, there's a bit of hope in some of them. And again, I don't want to give away spoilers for what anyone wrote, but some of the people that you would expect to be blackpilling had a few more gems of hope in them than you might expect. And
yeah, I mean, I particularly liked I liked also highlight Borzoi's story. It's very tender. It's something. He talks about something that it'll probably be very familiar to many on the many who've been harassed by journalists and professional hate watchers. But it's very tender. It's very moving. I really liked his entry. I really liked it.
Absolutely, that was, not to give spoilers, but that was one of the ones that I was thinking of just now when we were talking about black pills with a hint of white in them.
Yeah. Yes. We've now kind of broadening the subject. Since you put together the book and you wrote the prologue and the epilogue, and you talked about being inspired by Borges, but what other kind of writing inspirations have you taken from over the course of your career? Because you've written your own books, and you've also published with Terror House. What writers and such have kind of you drawn inspiration from in both your own writing as well as the kind of ethos you approach you took ending Bigley together?
Well, I think that in terms of my fiction versus non-fiction writing, my non-fiction writing, I wear my influences on my sleeve. I don't think that it's any sort of hidden influences or people that I've read that you wouldn't be able to guess from what I write and the topics that I cover. And I mentioned some of them. Mark Stein's, I've always enjoyed his writing. It's cutting, but also funny at the same time. And that's sort of what I try to aim for with my nonfiction. In terms of my fiction, I don't much like writing too much fiction. And I say that because I don't find that I have too much interesting to say. And unless I want to say something interesting, I don't want to write anything. I wouldn't want to write something that I wouldn't want to read. And so most of my fiction, when I'm writing fiction, it's something that struck me for a long time. And the idea, for example, I believe I called it 613 that I wrote with Terror House, the first one that I published with Terror House. That was based on an idea that I had that I wanted to dispute, for lack of a better term, works-based salvation. The idea that you can work your way into heaven. And that always struck in my craw for some reason, that there was something wrong with that. And it struck me one day that I could tell this story just about a piece of bread, and it would be enough of a symbolic story that it wouldn't bother almost any of the actual Christians out there, but it would explain what's wrong with the idea that the Christological sacrifice doesn't matter. And that's, in my opinion, and I don't want to go off on a religious track at all, but in my opinion, that's wrong, and so it's necessary that there be something else besides your own works. And so the idea of this metaphor just struck me, and I had to write it down. And so I wrote it down and submitted it to your contest. And the same with the New Garden was sort of a experimental literature in the same way that what's the name of that story without the letter E in it?
I know which one you're talking about, but it's not coming to mind. But yeah,
no. That one was someone wrote an entire book when simply didn't use the letter E, and it's a perfectly serviceable book. And in the same way, New Garden is a perfectly serviceable story. Nothing to write home about, but it does something interesting with the. Well, you should read it and find out for yourself. Yeah, it's funny because I completely missed it when I accepted it. And you had to point it out to me. Then I pointed it out to a friend of mine. He was like, "I still don't get it. Am I reading it wrong?" And I had to kind of partially retype it for him to get the joke. But yeah, New Garden is a great piece, as is 635. I really like that one because again, not to get into the theological argument, but I think you made your case for salvation and how it works very, very well. It's kind of with the fiction work you've done, you've kind of really there's obvious themes and you're trying to tell something, but you're not doing so in like an overly didactic fashion. You're not lecturing or talking down to the reader. You're allowing the fictional elements and the characters in your stories to kind of speak for themselves, which is way more effective, obviously, than we actually just published a book. Kind of structured around the same lines, called The Pilgrim's Digress by T.J. Martinell. And Martinell is coming from a right-wing perspective, and the book is basically about what he describes it as post-dystopian, what the potential future of the United States might look like, after there's a social collapse, and it's not some Fallout type thing, but like what might happen, you look at, like, say, a strict theological society, something like how the Puritans founded Massachusetts, and you start to get into psychology of, like, why did they think like that? Why would they have all these, moralistic laws? And he kind of goes into that, but he doesn't lecture the reader. He just, he
he just presents things through interesting characters, and you've captured a lot of the same energy with the things you've written for Terror House.
Well, the way I see it, I have a platform. If I want to just tell the reader something straight out, I have a platform where I write nonfiction, and I can write an essay and explain the way that the Supreme Court works, something like that. If I want to do that, I can. And I don't think that fiction's the place for that. I think that fiction, as I said earlier, I think it needs some ambiguity. I think that you need to be able to think for yourself with fiction and arrive at your own ideas. And if you're spoon-feeding the reader, then you might as well be writing an essay.
Yeah, exactly. That's a mistake a lot of amateur writers make when they're starting out. Trying to. It's a mistake that a lot of professional writers do. About a year to some change ago, when Joker came out, there was also that movie Cuck that came out that was supposed to be a super didactic movie about the evils of online radicalization, but it's so obvious and on the nose and just a hammer blow in terms of there's zero ambiguity. The main character is just the main character is a caricature of what liberals think right-wingers act like, the extremely online right-wingers act like. And it's it's bad, but it's a hilarious kind of, Tommy Wiseau kind of bad. Or at least I thought so. I mean, I'm not planning on watching that movie ever again, but, I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, that's something you absolutely don't want to do in fiction, which is, just hammer the reader over with dead obvious points. Like you said, it needs ambiguity.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember that I one of the people that read the draft of, is it 635? I can never remember what the...
It is 635. I actually have it open on my computer right now.
Excellent. I remember when I first gave the draft of that to 2 or 3 people, and it was 3 people. I gave that draft to 3 people, and of those 3 people, 2 of them said that they immediately understood the metaphor that was going on there and agreed with it, even though those 2 people were completely theologically opposed to one another. So that was good. But then the third said that he did not see where the story was going until the very last line, and then that last line brought the whole rest of the story into place for him, and I really appreciated that. That was what I had hoped for, that at least some people would have that, and I think that's important, that there should be you're building your own narrative, and if you're building your own narrative as the reader a little bit, you can't leave it all up to the reader, but as long as the reader has a little bit of input into what's going on in the story, I think that ends up building a relationship with the reader better than the alternative. And I think that's kind of what we're doing in Ending Big League, because some of the predictions in this story, by necessity, are going to be wrong. And it's up to the reader to decide which ones they think are more likely and which ones are less likely. And I think that that will make this story more touching and reach more people than if we just laid out the case for what's going to happen to Trump.
Well, yeah, and also, Terror House is a literary publisher, so we probably wouldn't have run that other book.
No.
There's plenty of pretty much any. I think I was talking with you with this earlier. When I with regards to how I was presenting the book, anyone can just comment on stuff. Anyone can just have an opinion. Everyone's got opinions, but being able to craft a good story, a good poem or whatever is something that requires skill and thought. And Ending Bigly really does this. If it was as you said, if it was just a book of essays about what might happen to Trump, it wouldn't really have the same impact. Like, you'd get a few people to buy it. It would be, they'd nod along in agreement. Maybe someone who disagreed with it would buy it to just kind of, finger fuck and try to find stuff that's offensive. But this is something that I think it will have relevance beyond January 20th. Just because. There's a lot of work there that stands on its own merits. we have a lot of writers who just took the idea of of the Trump presidency, which has been a huge thing in all of our lives ever since he announced his campaign, and they've created an interesting fictional take on it. The wide variety of the styles means that when you pick this book up, and you will buy it, you won't like everything, but you'll like some of the stuff. You'll really love some of the stuff. It's a great grab bag of interesting takes.
Oh, absolutely, and that was kind of my goal in accepting or not accepting stories, was not if I enjoyed them, but if they had a quality to them. And I think that there are a couple of the stories in the book. I won't say which ones, but there are a couple of them that I don't particularly enjoy. They're just not my cup of tea. And but they all had a quality to them that made them worth reading. So even if I didn't, this wouldn't be something that I would pick up on my own. I felt something because of them. And that was my goal for what was brought in and what wasn't, and I think that was well accomplished. I was happy with the result of that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's something that is that's something I have to kind of approach to in my role as the editor of Terror House. When I started out 3 years ago, and now every time I say 3 years ago, it's like, oh my god, it's been that long. But I've been a reader my entire life. I don't want to sound too pretentious. I've had my opinions on what makes good writing. But when I started Terror House, I had to kind of step outside my comfort zone and think, about works that are very, we get a wide variety of works. We publish a wide variety of works, and my mode of thinking is not necessarily, do I really enjoy this? I do stand by every single thing we've ever published, but even if it's something I wouldn't necessarily read on my own, I have to think, does this have merit? Does this have show talent? Does it show interesting ideas? And in that case, it's worth putting up. There's one example of this very early on in the site's first few months, where we got a short story from a writer that I didn't really like that much. I thought it was kind of weird. My two co-editors overruled me, and we ended up publishing the book, and that turned publishing the story, and that turned out to be a really good thing, because that author who published it has gone on to write a ton more stuff for Terror House and sites in our sphere, and I'm not going to identify this person, but they may or may not have a book forthcoming from Terror House. I'm really glad I'm really glad I didn't let my personal taste in that case, prevent me from working with a great writer. You took the same approach with Ending Bigly. It wasn't about what stuff that you personally agreed with. It was stuff that you found interesting and was kind of pushing the idea forward, even if it was in a way that you wouldn't have necessarily done. Something you would have necessarily done yourself or agreed with.
No, absolutely, and that was part of my process for soliciting a number of stories. Was I tried to ask a wide variety of people, especially people that I didn't agree with, for their contributions, and that was because I figured that if I'm setting out a call for these stories, then the people that would regularly interact with me on Twitter or wherever, they're going to be at least somewhat aligned with what I think, at least a little bit. Whereas if I go to people that maybe wouldn't think of contributing themselves, then they would take the prompting and appreciate being asked and come up with something that's completely unaligned with what I thought. And I was very happy with the result. Yes.
Are you thinking of doing any other kind of similar projects in this vein? Because in the span between you pitching the idea to me and us now on the verge of publishing the book, you got together a great collection of writers on a topic. Have you given a thought to doing anything else like this in the future? I definitely consider working with it. A project like this from you again, given how well this one turned out.
Oh, absolutely. If the thing is, the idea has to be there first. If I have something like this that just captures the zeitgeist in the way that I think that this has, that was what I think sold this for a lot of the contributors. Was not that, oh, Bill's writing a book, I want to contribute to Bill's book, I want to get in there. It was, wow, an interesting idea. I wonder what would happen to Trump. What is going to happen in the future? I should write that down. Oh, I wrote it down, and here's the story. So it needs to, the idea needs to come first. I absolutely would. I would very much be interested in doing this. This was a lot of fun. I got to read all kinds of stories from all kinds of creative people, and I'm sure if we had a longer timeline, we could have had twice as many contributors, but then the book would have gotten unwieldy. So in answer to your question, I think that absolutely, if the idea presented itself, I would very much spearhead something like this again, and hopefully we have a bit more time and can get even more people involved that didn't get involved this time just because they were unavailable or didn't have enough time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tragedy, but again, I'm really impressed with the fact that so many people were able to contribute to this in a such a short period of time. Particularly given the length of some of the contributions. I mentioned Borzoi's story earlier. His story is about 5,000 words long. That's pretty. It's pretty impressive to put something of that quality together on such a short time frame. I mean, I've been working on a poetry volume. I started it in June, and I'm at about I'm about 5,000 words into a poetry volume over 6 months. So I with some of the personalities, I have my differences with them that are published in this book, but I am genuinely impressed by the quality of the work that they put together on such a short time frame. You mentioned Landshark writing his story in about 3 hours. And if you can put something together in 3 hours, or put together a 5,000 word story over the span of like a few days, and it's really good, that's something I really respect.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I couldn't agree more. And I think that a number of the people, if they that there were, I would say probably 10 people who had early drafts of the story and asked if there was any way to extend the time period by a week or so, and we simply couldn't do it with the timeline that we needed to get through. But I'm sure that a number of them would have been able to do that. But you're absolutely right. I was blown away by not only Borzoi, but there are, I believe, four or five contributions that are over 4,000 words, and that you're right that the timeline was approximately 10 days. So going from the barely a seed of an idea to a finished product of 4,000 or 5,000 words in 10 days is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, as you said, approximately 30 contributors in that amount of time. I am so grateful that they were all able and willing to contribute to this, and yeah, I'm sure that people are very much going to enjoy it.
Yes. One more part of the book I want to highlight is Geo Penn's essay, which is a nonfiction essay, but it's not really political. It's dissecting art in the Trump era and what it might look like in the post-Trump era, and he kind of calls attention to more or less how insular and kind of self-congratulatory and more or less idiotic it's become. He talks about it in the context of performance art and visual art, but you can see it. You can see it pretty much anything kind of mainstream. I remember discussing this with Bryden, my co-host, a few episodes back. How the first episode of Saturday Night Live after Trump was elected in 2016, the opening was just one of the cast members, I forget who, in character as Hillary Clinton, doing a performance of Hallelujah, by Leonard Cohen, just playing it on piano and being sad, and like, oh, we're going to get through this. And it wasn't even intended to be funny. It was just like, oh, we're mourning. It's so horrible. We lost an election. It's all over. That's pretty much what defines all of this. Terrorhouse publishes, like I said, we're an apolitical publisher, and we publish people from all kinds of, stripes. We publish right-wingers, left-wingers, straight, gay, whatever. My policy is, if it's entertaining and good and and shows talent, I'll run it. But you see with these mainstream people, how they've completely lost the ball in regards to, being able to perceive reality. And this is something that GeoPen goes over in terms of objective versus subjective reality. This is something that people. He's not the only person who have made this observation. But you look at the SNL skit that I mentioned. You look at something like what happened in Argentina a few days ago when they legalized abortion, and all of a sudden you've got all these half-naked women in the streets, dousing themselves in war paint and having a weird satanic orgy. He sketches. I happen to like his essay because he just sketches out with citations. He's got citations. He's got footnotes. It's real academic about what the shape that art and the literature might take in the years to come.
Yes, I was very happy because he had originally said that he would not have time to complete his portion of that, but I knew the subject that he was talking about, so I made sure that he got it done on time and got it in, because it was worth it, because it is sort of a commentary on, even if it's subtle and only peripherally, it's sort of what the book is doing. It's kind of commenting on the opposite direction from where the book is going, and the shadow that what he's talking about leaves with the mainstream art is what we're doing with this almost violent creativity of forcing the future into the present with these speculative fictions about horrible things happening to Trump or wonderful things happening to Trump. Whereas it's simply uncreative to have a Hillary Clinton at a piano singing Hallelujah. And I don't mind Leonard Cohen. He's a nice Canadian boy. But it's the idea of using that as a political statement in this day and age is I don't know how to describe it. It's trite. It's pointless. And that's essentially what the majority of the art today from the left is, you're right. The mainstream is the better designator for it. But that's essentially what it's doing. Is it's trite. It's boring. There's nothing interesting going on. And one of the other stories in there comments on actually two of them, and I can't remember which is which, so I won't say the details of them, but two of them give predictions for where SNL will be going in the post-Trump era, and they have very different, but in some ways very similar predictions.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to bring that up, but it's in the book. You can read it in the book. And the reason I specify mainstream is because there are plenty of like outsider, writers and such of a left wing bent who are putting out great work. I promote some of them on Terror House. But the mainstream.
Absolutely, that's why I wanted to correct myself, because you're absolutely right. There are from all across the political spectrum, there are interesting voices out there, but the mainstream is the issue.
Yeah. My personal take on it is that we're probably just going to see the mainstream just get worse and worse regardless of what happens. I mean, the mere existence of the Trump phenomenon seems to have, upset some people. Seems to have scarred them. And I don't know. Nietzsche had that quip about how only a society in decline can produce great art. So, we'll have the horrible mainstream, but we have plenty of voices emerging who are very astute and know what they're doing, and will hopefully have a cultural impact. Some of them are in ending bigly, as it were. But yeah, I'm really grateful that GeoPen was able to get that done, because it's ending bigly is kind of like a full course meal. You've got the meaty stuff, the meat, the salads, the dessert, as it were, the stuff that's substantive and the stuff that's a bit lighter. It's a real smorgasbord of fictional and exploratory content.
Absolutely, I was very happy with how it all came together, and I was impressed by because again, this was simply 30 of the contributors. I was impressed by how well a coherent whole it ended up making. Again, from contributors who had most of them only had 10 days. There was one exception who got a little bit of extra time. You know who I'm talking about. But for the most part, even he only had 15 days. But in 10 days to have this many contributors given this whole of a meal, you're absolutely right. It's a full course meal. And it wasn't just all dessert, and it wasn't just all potatoes or anything like that. It was a full course meal. And I was very, very happy that that's how it all came together.
Yes. We're approaching up on an hour here. I think, it's a good time to kind of wind the show down. Always end at a high note and leave the audience wanting just a little more. Bill, is there anything else beyond ending bigly that you'd like to promote? Anything you'd want to plug? Anything you want to send the audience to check out?
Well, there's my previous book, which is Northern Reaction: Notes from a Frozen Place, and I always like to say that it's priced at cost, because I don't. Oh, that was something that we should mention. The proceeds for this book are going to be donated to a charity. We're not completely decided on exactly which one it is, but it will be donated to a charity. I'm not taking any of the profits for myself. But when I self-published my previous book, and as such, there was no real convenient way of doing something like that. And so as such, I simply priced it at cost. And that brought the price quite low and reasonable. And the way I like to tell people is that my wife Rose painted the cover of the book, and it's at the price it is. You can't get a print for that price. So just for the art, I think it's worth it.
Oh yeah, it's a nice, lovely cover, Northern Reaction. But yeah, we should mention that Bill's going to be bringing the profits of the book to a we haven't worked on the details yet, but we're going to be sending them to a cause that will further free speech and association and all the good stuff in America, which is something that we're all concerned about as outsider figures who have been persecuted in some form or another by the government media complex. So yeah, if you purchase Ending Bigly, you'll not only get an entertaining book, you'll be helping out a good cause as well. We'll have more details on that hopefully soon. And of course, you can follow Bill on Twitter. Your @ is B Marchant 3, if I recall correctly.
Marchant, but yes,
Marchant. I'm terrible at pronunciations. But yeah, you can follow him there. There's his website. The link will be in the description. And of course, you can check me out at my website is mattforney.com. All my links will be in the description. And of course, by Ending Bigly, The Many Fates of Donald Trump, it will be out on January 8th. That is this Friday at terrahousepress.com. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other places will also be stocking it. You'll be able to buy it, anywhere you like. And trust me, you'll know when it's out. I'm going to make sure that you hear about it. Okay, we're just going to be. In fact, I have rearranged my travel plans so I could show the book more efficiently, because that's just the kind of guy I am.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure that the contributors will also be wanting everyone to read their story. They've got a lot to be proud of, so, yeah.
Definitely check the book out. And that'll do it for this episode of Terror House Radio. Be sure to check in every day at Terror House Magazine, terrorhousemag.com for our latest short stories and other publications. Our books are at terrorhousepress.com. You can check out our social media links in the description. Ending Bigly by The Many Fates of Donald Trump, edited by Bill Marchant, will be out on January 8th, like I said. And of course, you can always find new episodes of the show by going to terrorhouseradio.com. Terror House Radio is produced by Bryden Proctor and presented by Jugs. Intro music by Meme Extremist. Illegitimate on Coverundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. I'm Matt Forney with Bill Marchant, and we are out.